Hello.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm okay. Getting ready for the holidays.
I know this has been such a crazy week already, and it's only Monday.
I am ready for a break.
You can say that again. So, this is our very first episode of the Banned Books podcast.
Yeah, here we are.
Very exciting, very cool. Um, so today for anyone listening out there, we're just basically gonna be doing a little intro to the podcast, a little intro to who we are, why we're here, why we're hanging out on a Monday night and recording this podcast. So, to give a little intro about me, my name is Mari. I am an artist. I've also been a museum professional for the past 6 years at this point. But I am big reader, love the arts, love all these big literary spaces. I just wrapped up my master's as well, so big brain over here thinking of all the things. Academia definitely puts a lot of thoughts in your head, and I'm apologizing ahead of time for this podcast because you will be hearing lots of rambly things, but hopefully you'll enjoy it if you're listening to us now. So, and we have Lily here as my historian contributor to the podcast.
Hello,
And
everyone.
co-host. Yeah, Lily, do you wanna tell the people a little bit about you?
So, like Mari said, I'm the little like history consultant, whatever you want to call me. Um, I am a museum curator, but my first love is history. So when she mentioned this to me, I got super excited and love the idea of like diving into the history of a book or book bans and just you can learn so much about how we are and why we are where we are in the world today based on history. And I think if enough people knew the full story, the good, bad, and the ugly, and a lot of it is ugly, um, you can create that empathy and space to like hopefully make at least your circle a better place.
No, yeah, definitely. I think when I was thinking a lot about this podcast, um, for me, I was thinking a lot of, oh, I want to like do something. Like coming off of the tails of our most recent election. Today is December 23rd, 2024. The that we're recording this. But we just recently had an election for anyone who's not US based, and we elected someone who I personally do not agree with. Um, and it just made me think a lot about like the different ways that we think about democracy, the different ways that we think about like different like key topics and policy issues. And one of the big things in the United States that has been going on within the past couple years, not just this recent year, but within the past couple years, has been this concept of book bans. And this has been popping up all over the United States, across schools, local libraries, city, states. And it's been really interesting to me, like passively following along as a big reader and someone who like does have a deep passion for books and for reading. I mean, that's how I originally learned how to read. Um, in English, but my first language is in Spanish. So learning English was through reading. So thinking a lot about like the power of books and the importance of books, but also thinking of if you are trying to learn about things or thinking about the history of like what happens and those types of books are getting banned or removed, then you are rewriting history. So I thought that was something really important to kind of think about. And I approached Lily and I was like, hey, I feel useless. And I feel like it'd be really interesting to maybe start this. For all we know, like this is just me and Lily hanging out, and this never sees the light of day. But if it does, you
I think
know,
it will.
this is just a way to think about what is happening in our current day and age as will be chrono. I want to use that word. We'll be following along to the different bands that are happening. And then as we are getting to the start of 2025, uh, there will be a release of the most banned books in 2024. So once that list is released, we'll be following that list along and looking at different books. So within, this episode, within other episodes, we'll be tackling a bunch of different books, some of those that have been officially banned, some that have been just heavily challenged. And yeah, thinking a lot about those things. I mean, I don't know about you, but like what are the things some of the things that come up when you think about like a book ban?
I think, you know, there's something, and every book lover will say this, there's something magical about being able to like open a novel and put yourself into a new story. And there's something incredibly empathetic that comes from reading because you are put into someone else's shoes and their mindset and their story. Um, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard it somewhere. Um, so we'll have to double check and fact check this. But I heard somewhere that our brains can't always tell the difference between a book character and a real person in your life. And so you are creating those kind of connections. So to read a book from a perspective that you've never lived or you've maybe never thought about or knew was out there, can just broaden your world a lot. But then also, I absolutely love historical fiction. Not every historian does. I just think it's a really wonderful way to bring people to the world of history. And, if it starts with watching a historical movie and then being like, oh, that person's real, let me learn more about them and hopefully go down that rabbit hole to get a broader picture and to get the whole story, I think is really wonderful. And historical fiction can do that as easily as movies. Um, but what's nice about books is that you can get a longer story. So,
No, yeah, I definitely agree with all those things. I think there's something really magical in getting lost in a book and like really like I remember when I was little and I would like I was a kid that would like get in trouble with like my parents because I would be like up late like under the covers like reading with a
mhm.
fucking flashlight and it definitely like it's cemented my love of reading but you would get just so lost in these worlds and it's obviously nowadays it's a little different from how it was when we were growing up. When we were growing up, cell phones and technology wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Mhm.
And like we didn't have phones to like sit around and go like, oh, I'm gonna go on TikTok and like do all these things.
Well,
You
who
like
knows? By the time this comes out, you might not be able to scroll on TikTok anymore.
follow us on TikTok. Eventually we'll post videos.
If it's, not banned.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely thinking about like growing up, we grew up around all these like books and finding those worlds and finding that breadth of knowledge. And I think it's been really interesting, like when I was looking at like what are some of our episodes are gonna look like, the types of books, I like mentioned this to you, the types of books that are like on this like list of like most banned books is so like there's some that I expected,
Hmm.
but then there's others that I was like, huh, like I think the one that surprised me was The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yeah,
Like that's not one that I would have immediately like looked at and assumed like, oh, like that's banned.
right. And I mean, I read it at least 10 years ago, but I don't remember anything scandalous in it that like would put it on a banned book list. Um, but I think we've seen the like rise of division and this like ultra conservative movement that wants to prohibit free speech for everybody but them. And so if there's anything, even like a mere suggestion of something they don't agree with, suddenly a book is challenged or banned. And that I think is what is so interesting to me when it comes to book bans is the people calling for it often more often than not are like, don't inhibit my free speech, but it's my free speech to say I don't like this book, and therefore you're not allowed to say it or read it or have anything to do with it. And that in itself is a like prohibition of the First Amendment. Um, so I'm fully like, you don't want your kids to read it, that's fine. Don't make those decisions for other people's kids.
Oh,
So
I definitely agree. I think it's also to request that a library remove books just because you deem them inappropriate. Like, one of the things that I saw like going around TikTok, like immediately after the election, is that on the side of book talk, a lot of creators and book talk creators were going off and they were like, oh, well, like books aren't political. I'm sorry for anyone who is listening and not watching, we both just made a face. Because if you, all books are political, whether or not you acknowledge them to be political books, they're political. The Hunger Games, it's a political book. Catcher in the Rye, like Huckleberry Finn, like all these books have different levels of political just because it's set in a fantasy world. Harry Potter is, we have our things with authors, which we can tackle in later episodes, but they're fighting back against corruption.
yeah.
Like just because you add a couple, you know, trolls and wizards and broomsticks, magic, like it doesn't change the the context of like what the plot is. Like at the end of the day, like all these books that you grew up reading, all these books that you love or consider like treasured books, or even books that you're like, oh, like this isn't political, this is like a yaw romance novel. There is some level of it that will have political aspects to it. Even just thinking about the types of authors that you're reading, like if you're only reading white authors, like that's a political statement in of itself. If you're not surrounding yourself and like looking at different voices, looking at writers of color, looking at things that are maybe um, in different languages or translated, like there's a lot that you lose in that. And if you think of some of like the greatest writers of our time, like they didn't just write, hey, the sky is blue and today I drank a coffee. The end. Because that would not make for a very long book. That is a poem.
And I think especially in those fantasy books, um, I think every good book is rooted in some level of truth and reality because somebody had to write it. A real person with their lived experience wrote it and will have put some part of their reality into that. So,
You know what they say, right? What you know.
did a song just pop into my head? Yeah, it did. Not related, but right, what you
I
know
saw
is
I
a
saw
major line in that song.
I
So,
saw the recognition just flash across your eyes.
but actually, that musical is incredibly political too. So it's sort of relevant.
It works. It works.
Yeah.
Um, I think for our first little intro, this is probably a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Did we just complete our first episode?
I think we might have.
Crazy. Anything else we should let the people know?
Go out and support your local library. Their funding is largely based on donations, but also government funding is based on how many people they have signed up for library cards. So go support your local libraries.
Yeah, they don't just have books, they have audiobooks, they have DVDs, they have records. They also have like resources for anyone who's looking for jobs, access to technology. And if you are someone that is of lower income, like this is a really great place to be able to go there, look for jobs, spend an afternoon there, and you don't have to pay for an expensive cup of coffee to be able to study or work there. Like they're genuinely nice places to like sit. And especially like I'm currently based in New York City. New York has some of the most beautiful libraries in the city. Like definitely go out, support your libraries. At the bare minimum, go get yourself a library card. Make it your New Year's resolution to go get a library card.
But also, life is super expensive right now. The world is super expensive. And libraries are a place where you are not expected to spend money. They are free. Free, 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 free. So, like, that's kind of nice to be like, oh, I'm going to go spend an afternoon somewhere and know that you're not going to have to drop at least $20 doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and there's so much programming that a lot of like bigger libraries do too. If you have kids, they have kids reading time. They'll have crafts sometimes. Like I remember growing up, the local library that I used to go to, they would have like little author meetups and they would have like little talks and little film events and I would go to those things and I would be so excited as little like 12-year-old me to go see what was going on at the library and then, bike home. Well, there's exciting things that are happening and they're free, most importantly. So definitely support your local libraries. Like, right now, obviously the focus of this podcast is thinking a lot about banned books and like the books specifically, and we'll go into different books and talk about them and have our own little book club in a sense. But at the end of the day, like books live in libraries. So this is also very pro-library. So if you're anti-library, you should stay and listen so we can convince you otherwise.
100%.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for, I guess, tuning in for the first one. You can find us on social media at the Banned Book Podcast. We have TikTok for the time being. We also have Instagram. We'll link it in all the things below, and you can check us out. And if you have suggestions of books that you think we should read, check out topics you want us to talk about, definitely let us know. Reach out to us on socials. I pretty sure you can also comment below on at least on Spotify. We'll see with the other Apple Music, Audible, all those things. But yeah, let us know.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks.